Hi there, we're going to work on a dish that I really like. It's pasta fagioli, which is basically, it's a bean pasta soup kind of thing. It's called pasta fagioli in Italian. It's a type of, another term that we might use as a minestra, which is it's not quite a soup is more liquidy. And so minestra is a little more, a thicker kind of thing. So it's almost like not quite a stew, but you know, that kind of a thing. Halfway between a soup and a pasta dish, okay? So what we need for this is, I'll talk a little bit about the ingredients. So we're gonna use peeled tomato. I think I talked about this before. I like the peeled tomato, Muti brand. It has no potassium chloride in it, and so it's basically tomato juice and tomatoes in it. So that's what I like about it. And the tomatoes are from Europe, so they are from Southern Europe, so they're actually picked ripe, so the tomato's fully ripe. And that's what's nice about this. Instead of some of the ones you might get locally that are, you know, you'll still see some of the white on the top of the tomato, and that just means it isn't fully ripe when it was picked. That's one thing. We're going to use some onion, so about a half an onion, probably more like a quarter of an onion. Half a bouillon cube. In this case, I'm using sort of an herbs-based bouillon cube. Okay, but it can be a vegetarian bouillon cube of some type. And then Ditali pasta, so it's a D-I-T-A-L-I. That's the shape of the pasta. It's a little tube, little tiny tube, Ditali. And beans. So I've got some white kidney beans that I took from a can. We'll talk about beans in a moment. And then we have some reconstituted red kidney beans that a friend of my family, friend of my mother's, grows on his farm. So we were reconstituting these dried kidney beans. Okay, so let's talk about beans. So you can use dried beans. Take you overnight. You'd have to soak them to rehydrate them overnight. Typically what you do is put them in a pan, or in a pot, sorry, fill it with water, put the beans in, put them in the fridge overnight, 6 to 8 hours, and they'll reconstitute. Then you refresh the water, so just strain them, put some more water in to sort of clean them off, and then they're ready to be used. So that's the dried bean. I think the canned beans, which you can buy as well, as you know. The thing about canned beans is they're nutritionally, they're about the same as dried beans. There's no difference. And with the canned beans, though, we have a lot of sodium in there. So a can of beans typically will have about 4 to 450 milligrams of sodium in it. So if you want to control your sodium levels more specifically and control it to keep it down as much as possible to taste, then use the dried beans if you want to do that. But 450 milligrams isn't too bad, especially if it's spread out amongst, you know, family of 4. So that's like 100 milligrams, no big deal. So I still use the canned beans most of the time. Occasionally we'll use the rehydrated ones, only because I know, you know, they're organic from a farm, and it's nice to do that. So we'll talk about the process in a minute. All right, so this is a really simple recipe. There are very few ingredients in this recipe. This is the tomatoes that I got out of my can of tomatoes. And I've picked 2 tomatoes. And what I want to do, because I would like the tomatoes to blend into the soup itself, I'm going to cut these in half and then just sort of, you know, dice them up like this, make it into small pieces. We'll cook these up in a minute, but just to give you an idea of the size. Okay. So like that, just chopped up, move that over. So we've got this onion here. I'm going to use about a quarter of an onion, sorry. So we've got half, and then I like it sort of stringy. So you still get some stringy parts in your pasta fagioli. So we're going to slice these really, really thin. And, you know, it's kind of thin like that. My daughter doesn't like onions that much, so I'm going to chop these up a little more just for tonight, because we're going to have this for dinner. But normally I just like to keep the pieces a little bit chunkier because I enjoy that in the dish. Okay, so we've got our onions, we've got our tomato, and it's really, the rest is about cooking. So we'll go to the cooking process now. Okay, so what we're going to do is turn the heat on for this element to about medium, so about a 5 on my 10 scale here. And we're going to start with a little bit of olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil, right here. Bartolli. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of extra virgin olive oil in there. Just about, I would say, the equivalent of about teaspoon, teaspoon and a half. Okay, gonna let that heat up a little bit. So I'm using a saucepan here because then we're gonna cook the beans separately from the pasta, and I'll explain that process in a minute. So let that heat up a little bit, and we're gonna saute the onions a bit. Onions are a bit red because I had the tomatoes nearby, so that's okay though, right? We're gonna just saute these. Turn on the fan. So not very long, just a bit, just to get them clarified a bit. And once they're clarified, then we can add in the tomato. So let's give it a minute here. Okay, so they've been cooking for a bit, like about a minute, minute and a half at medium. So now I've got them, they're pretty lucid, so that's good, that's what we want. We're gonna add in the tomato. So this is the chopped peeled tomato that I got from my can of tomatoes. So let's chop it there. So that's going to cook for a bit here. Probably about another 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, so the tomatoes have been cooking in here with the onions for about 3-4 minutes. And at this point I'm going to crank up the heat. Crank it up a bit. And we're going to start to caramelize some of this, the onions and the tomatoes together. So that's just like caramelizing is just releasing of the sugars from the food into the pan, and there's usually some residue. When the sugars come out, they start to brown a bit. So that's usually the darkening that you see. Okay, so we're gonna do a little bit of that. Temperature's been turned up a bit. Now we're gonna add the vino. So we got some Chardonnay here, just some inexpensive Chardonnay. That'll work. Just put some in. It's not very much, maybe, I don't know, 1/8 of a cup is what I put in, something like that. Just gonna let that evaporate. Alright, so I think we're good, and it'll continue evaporating. We're gonna put in our white kidney beans. Those are going in. These came from a can, like I said. And then here are the red kidney beans. These have been soaked. And now, the water had been cleared out, and they were strained, and now they have additional water. They were in the refrigerator. It's nice and red, so it's okay though. We don't mind that red in the pasta fagioli, and it probably has some good flavoring in it. So we'll do that. We'll move that in. So now we've got the two beans, the onions, the tomato, and there was some white wine put in there. I'm going to let that fester a bit. And what we want is our quarter bouillon cube or half bouillon cube. We'll just do a half bouillon cube in that. We'll have to taste it later. You want this particular mixture here with the beans. Before you place it in with the pasta, you want this to be about the salt flavoring that you like. So, you may not like what I just did, so you may want to add some water in here. I like to have a little extra bite, a little extra saltiness in this part of the dish. Then when we add it to the pasta, that has water in it already, and I'll show that in a moment, it'll dilute a bit in that water, okay? So I don't mind it being a little saltier. Okay, so we're going to let this basically, I'll turn it down, and we're going to let it simmer for about 10-15 minutes. Okay, so it's just going to sit there and simmer for 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, so my water is boiling, as you can tell. And I think we talked about this before, that I usually put in, I'm looking for my salt. Here, it's right in front of me. Okay, so normally when I'm cooking pasta, I'll put a couple of palmfuls, approximately, a tablespoon and a half to 2 tablespoons of salt. Now there's 2 liters of water in this pot, because what we're doing, I said, we're doing a minestra, so it's pasta fagioli is like a liquidy pasta dish. So we want to have some water, but we don't have too much water because we'll be adding in the fagioli or the beans into here. So I'm going to just put, okay, I better do this. Okay, look at my palm here. So I'm putting in what might be the equivalent of about a half a teaspoon to maybe 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt in here. And I'm doing that because there's less water, one, and two, the mixture of the beans that we're going to add in has a half a bouillon cube in it, which is about 800 milligrams. Okay, now don't forget this is for 4 people, so that'd be about 200 milligrams each. So it's not too much salt. I mean, it's 200 milligrams. I think 1,500 is the standard for a day for a person. So it'll be about 200 milligrams each. And I just put a little extra salt in there, so maybe it'll be 250 milligrams each. So I think it's reasonable. Now I've tasted my my bean mixture, and for me it's perfect. Now for you, my friend David, it's probably too much. So you may not want to start with a bouillon cube. If you don't like that, or put a 1/4 bouillon cube in. The bouillon cube has other flavoring in it that really helps with the flavoring. But you could skip that and just salt it to taste, and then use that. And then at the end, when everything's mixed together, you can then again taste for salt and add some salt at the end. It's better to add less to start and then add to it if you want more, rather than doing it all overdoing it, and then you'd have to add water to dilute it. So we've got the water boiling here. We're going to add in, okay, this is where we have to figure out proportions of pasta. So right now, this is a 900 gram bag, and I've got about half of it used up. And don't forget, this is for 4 people. So I've got about 450 or so grams of pasta. So that works out to about 100 and, what's that work out? 450? So about 110, 115 grams per person. That's probably a little too much, actually. Probably for 4 people, I want no more than about 350 grams. Okay, so I'm going to use most of this, but not all of it. And I'll explain why. So because there were beans in the dish, and there's liquid in the dish, and we don't want this, this pasta to take over, and then this becomes more like a pasta dish rather than a soupy pasta dish. So about 350 grams, I think would be about right for 4 people. So it's about 75 grams a person for this kind of a dish. So let me just get that going here. So this is going to cook for about 7 or 8 minutes, but about 2 or 3 minutes in to this cook, we'll add in our beans. So we'll be back for that. Okay, so we've been cooking the pasta for about 3 minutes, and it's about another 4 minutes left in the cook. So what I'll do right now is I'm going to take the bean mixture, as you can see right here, and we're going to mix it into this pasta dish here, pasta bowl, and it will cook the last 4 to 5 minutes together. So it's got a pretty vigorous boil there. So we'll let that go for about 4 or 5 minutes. Then we'll give it a taste and see how things are. Okay, just a quick lesson in pasta cooking. So the package that I bought, this is Ital Pasta brand d'Italis, and it says here, what does it say? You guys can probably read it same as me, right? It says 7 minutes to perfect cook al dente. Well, you know what? At 7 minutes it was still pretty hard, so I've been cooking it for an extra 3 minutes, and we'll try it after. So we'll try it at 10 minutes. That's the d'Italy pasta. So let's give it a shot because it's almost 3 more minutes here. So again, just first. Okay, it's kind of looking like it might be okay here. Let's take a look. Let's try this out. Nope. Needs another minute or 2. So I'll put another 2 minutes on. Okay, so what I did is it's still cooking, another 2 minutes or so. I have tasted it, and I think it needs a tiny bit more salt. So again, it's better to have less salt, less saltiness to start. So I'm just going to put another pinch of salt in there, and we'll check it again in a few minutes once the pasta's cooked to verify that it's good to go or not. Okay, as I said, the pasta took about 10 minutes to cook. It's ready now. I've tried it. So instead of the 7 minutes on the package, make sure you taste your pasta first. Make sure that it's cooked to your liking. I kind of like things al dente, so it's slightly al dente. You'll see the consistency of the soup here. it really is like a soup, but it's kind of, you know, it's chunky, okay? The kind of thing you get at a buffet. Okay, so to finish this off, we're gonna put some fresh parsley in here. Now you can put this on each dish when you serve it, or you can mix it in. I kind of like to mix it in at the last minute into the into here, and it gives a nice nice scent. But you could put it on in each bowl at the top just as a garnish. And the last thing we're going to do as well is we're going to add a little more acid. So I'm going to take a piece of lemon that I have here. It's about a quarter lemon, and I'm just going to squeeze in some lemon juice. You can obviously use the prepared concentrated lemon juice if you'd like, but it's just a good little squeeze of sort of a third of a lemon. Okay, all right, so now we're ready to serve it. And you know, my serving is basically, you know, half liquid and half pasta. So there you go. There's your pasta fagioli, done with a combination of canned white kidney beans and rehydrated red kidney beans. So just a few afterthoughts from cooking the pasta fagioli. You can do the same thing using chickpeas. So if you want to use kidney beans, or you can use you know, white cannellini beans, like those are typically how it's made with the white cannellini beans. And so, but you can use chickpeas if you'd like. That's a chickpea dish as well. Use the same method to cook it. And the other thing I wanted to mention, a few things that we learned along the way, which was that the pasta doesn't necessarily cook in the time that the package says it cooks, so make sure you taste it. Don't over salt when you start the cooking process. You can always add a little bit at the end. And I think that's about it. All right, I hope you enjoy pasta fagioli.